we're back to Harlem and to John Hammond.
Well, John used to come to the club that Barney Josephson started after he had had a long hiatus. You know how, I mean, Cafe Society was really killed by the nastiness of the Daily Mirror, then the anti-communist stuff, and a guy named Lee Mortimer, who was a real bastard, right-wing bastard. So Barney had been, you know, in retirement for a while, but then he started up again, and he started a place called the Cookery in the village. And so John used to come there quite a bit because he knew Barney. He and Barney had a close collaboration at the heyday of Cafe Society. And I would frequent it quite a bit. I forget, they had a limited menu, but there was something that they had that I really liked. Oh, baked macaroni was like, it was nice. Anyway, he brought back Alberta Hunter. He did all sorts of stuff. Joe Turner and
Helen HUMES was there.
Who?
Helen HUMES.
Yeah, Helen. Oh, and Helen was. Make a note of Helen and Buddy Tate. I want to say something about that. It has to do with Birdland. So there was, John came in and something, and I was there. And John was very, he was impulsive, what he says. Yeah. So he says to me, he puts his hand on my shoulder, I was sitting down, and he said, come on with me, I want you to hear somebody. Because what am I going to say? I'm going to say no to John Hammond, and I was interested. So I managed to, I was known there, so I managed to take him and say that I pay my check, and there was John really wanted to get. So he had his car there, and John was a very good driver, and he drove everywhere. So we said, he didn't tell me anything. He said, we're going to Smalls. So we drove up to Harlem, and there, I may have said this already, but there, he pulled up in front of Smalls, which, if I remember correctly, it's on one of the main drags in Harlem. Now they're called different things, Malcolm X and Adam Clayton Powell, whatever, but it was really an extension of Fifth Avenue or something. And the moment John pulled up, and it seems like they already knew his car. When he got out, two guys came up and said, hello, John, let me take it. They took the car because it was impossible to park there. They took his car and went somewhere where they could park it. Meanwhile, somebody else, as soon as he came to the door, Smalls was fairly big. It had an upstairs and a downstairs. And the place was pretty much packed, but zoom, got us up in a great table with what it was all about was George Benson, who was one of John's so-called discoveries, and he wanted me to hear George, which was a treat. But the main thing that I remember is not so much George, whom I heard plenty of later, who was great, but was the way John was received in Harlem years after he had really been an important figure, because he was no longer that, most of what he was doing by then, aside from discovering Bob Dylan, was that, and what's his name?
Springsteen.
The New Jersey favorite.
Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce. I remember he came to a little Narrows meeting. He was a little governor's meeting, and again he said, I want you to hear something. He had a cassette of Springsteen, and boom. So anyway, I mean, this was years after his heyday, and still the way he was received was like, not just, I wouldn't say like a celebrity, he was received like a homeboy. But somebody who was instantly recognized and had respect and affection. Well, no. So that was interesting. And, other things were less happy. My good friend Hank O'Neill, who had the chiaroscuro label, and really did a fine job with it. He relied a lot on John, and John did some good things, got him involved with Buck Clayton and other people, but then he gave him some really bad advice, and eventually that sunk the label. Let's not talk about that. Helen HUMES, right before I forget.
I guess I want to say something about Hammond for a second. If you were hip in Harlem in the late 60s, early 70s, you might have known Hammond as the fellow who got Billie Holiday out and exposure, and Basie, and Charlie Christian. And so it's beautiful. That story is beautiful because it's like a community's gratitude to John. So, but I cut off a story about Helen HUMES and Buddy Tate, which is very
well. That brings us Basie. You know, Basie's club in Harlem was another place where John would hang out, and he recorded all these things for Vanguard, including Ruby. He and Ruby. Well, Ruby had a weird relationship with everybody, but. Just briefly, we've talked about Buddy Tate and his band at the Celebrity Club and all that. There was a one-night thing which I think was organized by Columbia Records, but it may have been somebody else. It was a kind of, see, Birdland had become for a while, it was a Latin jazz club, and then it was taken over by a rhythm and blues singer and had his name on it. I forget what his name was. And it had become, you know, a non-jazz thing. So there was the idea of doing one night at Birdland. That was what it was billed at, to bring back the jazz to Birdland. So there were a number of acts, all of them contemporary, except for Buddy Tate and somebody else, I forget who, on horn and the rhythm section, and Helen HUMES. So the thing had sort of gone on for quite a while with a number of acts, and to tell the truth, nothing was received with tremendous enthusiasm. No, it was okay with it. So this was totally different from the other stuff, which was mostly like post-bebop and some other things like that. And so Buddy and Helen came on, and almost immediately got everybody's attention, because the main thing was they were swinging from the start. None of this other shit had been swinging, really. You know? So, I mean, the audience was probably not their kind of audience, but there was something that immediately grabbed them because it was so much more lively and attention-getting, and you know, and so they did a set that got huge applause, and it was so gratifying to see that. And Helen, of course, was wonderful, and Helen, to me, was always, you know, certainly, well, Basie didn't have any, well, very briefly he had some other girl singers, but they're not even worth mentioning, but she was wonderful. Great big band singer, and you know, she started out as a blues girl. When she was very young, she made records for OK. And she was a sweet lady, and Bob Porter, my friend Bob Porter, recorded, I think it was one of her last things. She recorded with Lester Young, Pleasing Man Blues, great vocal, and Lester takes a solo in that the way he comes in, it's a medium tempo towards slow blues. The way he comes in on that is worth the price of admission. But Helen had a comeback, which was very nice. She made some good records out in California, and she was great, and a lovely lady. She was so sweet. And she always reminded me a little, there was a similarity between her and Mildred Bailey, not so much in style as in the quality of the voice. And there's a photo of them somewhere with the two of them together. They're just kind of cute. They were both rather heavy. Helen she was great. She was, I had the good fortune of seeing her live a number of times, and she was great live. She had very good audience communication. But that thing at Birdland was so gratifying to somebody like me with which I had to keep under wraps, my preference for a certain kind of music. Not that, I mean, I love bebop and everything, but this was something that, you know, it had that oomph, and that audience responded to that. It was unpretentious, but the tickets right from the start, and it was swinging, and it was, oh man, you know, that was it. They never played Birdland. Helen was never in Birdland, neither was Buddy for we talked about Buddy, but Buddy was like, he had that Texas thing, you know. There is a Texas thing. Did I mention Booker Ervin? Booker was one of my favorites. Yeah. Booker was a marvelous tenor player. Incidentally, we talked about Nat Hentoff. One of the first things Nat did for Cadence was a Booker Ervin thing, and. He had, I think Horace Parlan was the pianist, but he couldn't use his real name, so Nat gave him the name Felix Crow. You know what that is? That's from a Thomas Mann
Isn't
novel.
Con Man and Thomas Mann's novel, The Adventures of Felix Crow?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that was Nat. He's not the one. I think somebody else got inspired by that and called our drummer Kunstbauer. Those pseudonyms were great to use. Anyway, Booker was from Texas, and Booker had that thing. Booker had tremendous energy, great imagination. He's best known for his work with Charlie Mingus. Better Get It in Your Soul and those things. When he was with Mingus live, it could be incredible. And he had a lot of stamina, but that isn't the main thing. He was an extraordinarily gifted player and had beautiful sense of melody as well as that powerful soul thing that he had. And it was such a pity when he had the kidney thing, which had nothing to, he did not indulge in any of it. He didn't have any bad habits. Maybe drank a little bit, but never to excess. But he died of a kidney disease, and much too young. But he was terrific. But I tell you, he was from Texas, and there is a Texas thing about tenors. And we have Herschel Evans, and you know, we have Buddy Tate, and we have to some extent Illinois, who was in that family, but he was born in actually he was born in Mississippi, right near New Orleans, right in the border there. But the real Texas people, you know, I mean, they have something. So Victoria Spivey, who had her own record label, and incidentally was the first to record Bob Dylan, and he was known as what, Zimmerman? Was that his name? on the harmonica. I was with her and her companion Lenny Kunstad, who was a whole story in himself. But anyway, we walked into the village gate, and Booker was on the stand. He was in the middle of a solo. And Vicky, who had never seen him before, and really didn't know anything, wasn't really her kind of music, although she was very open to it. Immediately, after about a minute or so, she said, Texas. And his style was a very contemporary one. It wasn't that he sounded like Herschel Evans or anything like that, but she recognized that Texas thing, so it definitely exists. I mean, it's there.